Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today, we are joined by Carl and Lavinia. So, I'll start with you, Carl. Maybe you can do a quick introduction and tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll head over to Lavinia.
Yeah, thank you, Jean Paul, for inviting me to your podcast. It's always a pleasure, to speak with you. So I'm a U.S. and Canadian immigration lawyer. I focus mostly on business and family immigration. I've been practicing law for almost a decade now. After working at various employers, including top immigration law firms and the only Francophone legal aid clinic in Toronto, I decided to open my own law firm. So I opened it in November of 2023. Then in January, I was really happy and fortunate to welcome my law partner Lavinia Latham to the firm, and we branded to Alphonse Latham LLP. So our firm specializes in U.S. and Canadian immigration, and also we do employment, human rights, workplace investigation, and corporate training. Yeah, so a little bit about myself, like I have a Haitian, I have a Haitian background. Came to Canada when I was a teenager. And I grew up in Ottawa. I was fortunate enough, to go to law school with my older brother. He's a lawyer now in New York. And we did the dual JD program with Michigan State. After law school, I did my articling at the bilingual execution boutique in Ottawa, where I work on interesting cases, including some of the cases at the Supreme Court dealing with language rights. Then, at that time when I was in Ottawa articling, Lavinia was in Toronto. So I was looking for a way to end long distance with Lavinia, and that's why I came to Toronto. And that's when I fell in love with immigration. So I started working at the Centre Francophone of Toronto. I was, my first case was probably one of the case that had the biggest impact in my life. Like I was representing a refugee who came from Congo, and he was doing reports about soldier raping women in Congo. And he did one of those reports, and as a result of the report, one of the soldier that he wrote about went to his house, kidnapped his wife, um, beat her severely, and she ended up dying as a result of the injuries that she had. So the organization that he was working with, like when they learned of the news, actually called me, to inform me, that the wife passed away and sent me the death certificate. And I was the one who had to do a death notification. So imagine that, JP, like my first year as a lawyer, my first refugee case, I had to do a death notification to my client, not something that they teach you in law school. And that's how, like I really fell in love with immigration after that, because like things got real really quick, right? I ended up winning that refugee case, and that client I'm still in touch with. He got his Canadian citizenship now, and he's also remarried. So he was able to find, like another wife here in Canada. Yeah, so like I've been doing immigration ever since. I started doing mostly individual immigration, the refugee immigration, then like a few years afterwards, I got my New York bar and I got an opportunity to do corporate immigration. And now I combine both corporate immigration and individual immigration in my current practice and law firm.
And Lavinia, how about yourself?
Yeah. So I am a human rights lawyer. I practice employment law, workplace investigations, as well as corporate training. I'm also on a speakers bureau called FKB Media, where I do presentations, speeches for women's leadership. In my practice here at Alphonse Latham, it's really exciting because I'm able to, include those various different aspects of my professional trajectory within the partnership and within the firm, which is really exciting. My background is specifically, I've built up expertise expertise in anti-Black racism specifically, and I've spent a lot of my career really fighting anti-Black racism through various different mechanisms. I started off in criminal defense work before I moved into, a little bit of family. I realized that, it gets a little too real, to use Carl's language, as it relates to, those disputes between a former wife and a former husband. So I moved then into specifically anti-Black racism work at the African Canadian Legal Clinic, where we were acting as interveners on all kinds of matters in all kinds of different areas of law, specifically from the angle of anti-Black racism. And it was in that role that I fell in love with this work as a human rights lawyer, specifically within anti-Black racism work. In that role, I was able to litigate before the Supreme Court of Canada on 4 matters of national importance. I was able to speak to the United Nations about the situation impacting Black people here in Canada. It was at the time during the beginning of the United Nations International Decade for Peoples of African Descent, which they've since expanded again in Canada here for another, I think, 2 to 4 years. I think it's extended to 2028 because the situation is that dire as it relates to peoples of African descent here in Canada. Following the unfortunate closure of the African Canadian Legal Clinic, I was tasked with helping Black Ontarians remain the continuity between the African Canadian Legal Clinic services and then the Legal Aid Ontario, them taking over those services before the new Black Legal Action Center was created. So that happened, and it was really great to be able to at least give some continuity to Black Ontarians who really do need those services as it relates to access to justice. Following that, I joined Toronto Catholic District School Board, again, really advocating against anti-Black racism, but this time from a proactive lens. So I wasn't acting as counsel, but I was the human rights equity advisor to the director and to the board at large, where the impact was quite great. It was a very visible role in the sense of, leading over 100 equity and human rights workshop sessions, conducting intake for human rights complaints, presentations, corporate training to all levels, all stakeholders related to Toronto Catholic. In that role, I wanted to take the role a bit further. It was a project from ADM Education Equity Minister Patrick Case. This was his project that he had put together with a parent who was quite aggrieved by the situation of anti-Black racism. Her name is Charlene Grant. And so she started an organization called Parents of Black Children, which advocates for families who are experiencing anti-Black racism before the education system. To this day, they still do that work. It's fantastic. But I mentioned them because if it wasn't for that advocacy and Patrick Case's vision for putting human rights lawyers into these roles and individuals with the experience and the expertise as it relates to human rights, I wouldn't necessarily have been able to do the proactive human rights work at the Toronto Catholic District School Board. So there was that. Following that, I wanted to build into the brand new Human Rights Equity Advisory Office, which still exists to this day. So I created it at the school board. I wanted to build in a workplace investigations branch so that when you have human rights complaints, it's not just the complaint coming in and it's just sitting and nothing's happening with it. You actually have a workplace investigator, someone who knows the lived experience, and not just the lived experience, but also the expertise and the know-how behind anti-Black racism, because it's so nuanced. I wanted to build that. And so I took an advanced workplace investigations course to learn those skills. And then that's when I made a jump back into private practice at a firm before realizing that I wanted to really have a little bit more control over what this work would look like, and over my own, personal life and work life together, while doing workplace investigations in the most impactful way possible. So, a little bit about me. I love everything Beyonce. I would say that I'm a Beehive member, but not the crazy Beehive members. Like, I'm not out here killing people. That wouldn't be good for a lawyer. I run YouTube channels. I love natural hair. I've got a YouTube channel called Fine Natural Hair Rocks, and another YouTube channel that's dedicated to socio-legal commentary, more connected to my work as a lawyer. And that's just my namesake, Lavinia Latham, JD. So it's really busy, but I've built the career in life that I absolutely love. And Alphonse Latham LLP has been literally like the cherry on the top. of enjoyment from where I am in my career right now.
Now, for both of you, I guess we'll start with Carl. Let's talk more about Alphonse Latham now. I mean, you've had such a wide, both of you obviously wide range of experiences, and now you're coming into running a firm together. What have you learned? You know, it's only been obviously a short period of time, but based on some of those experiences, what do you like about having that ability to run your own firm? And what are the things you've learned? And I know, Carl, obviously you've had an additional year and a bit on your own with it, but what's different there? You know, for anyone thinking about going out on their own or partnering with someone that you can share with that experience.
No, I think it's a really different experience when you're on your own and when you have a partner. So I will speak on both. Let's talk when you're on your own. When you're on your own, like it's really difficult because like when I started my own firm, I had no client. So I was pretty much, starting from scratch. Like I had to build a practice, like put my name out there. So what I did, I'm a really social person. So I did a lot of networking event. I joined lots of different groups, so and I also reached out to contacts that I already have, my law school classmates, friends from undergrad, my own family, like letting everyone know what I was doing. And yeah, that paid off. Like a lot of the clients I was getting were referrals, so like that was really good. But like when you're a solo practitioner, like it's good to have people that you could go to ask different questions. And I was really good because of my network of identifying who those people were that could give me advice on different step of the program. Like I had a lot of friends that were solo practitioner themselves, that did the like their own firm. So they were able to give me advice on case management system, which accountant to use, like what system. Some of my friends were even so nice to even share templates with me, like immigration templates. Whenever I had a question about immigration, like a really complex immigration case, I will call one of my mentors that I had, like working at other past employers. So like yeah, like the experience as a solo practitioner, like it's difficult, but having people that you could ask questions for and having templates and system in place, makes it easier. Like as a solo practitioner, one of the things that I found challenging was to, manage profile, like, having like a consistent cash flow. Because sometimes, you're doing a lot of work, you're doing marketing, you're doing admin work, but you're not actually billing. So it was hard at first, like to actually build. But like I was fortunate enough, like with the clients that I had, I had some wins which generated additional clients. And I was able to get also some recurring clients, that were much bigger and that had work, so those, now we're in a situation now, like where, like we don't need to worry about cash flow and we're profitable already. So like talking about the partnership, like I think that's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, like in terms of the law firm. Because like when you're a team, when you have two brain of lawyers, and the thing is, like the way that I think is a bit different than Lavinia. So, she adds, to whatever we're doing. And in terms of the profitability of the law firm, because, like we have two people billing instead of one, so we're able to meet the financial goals even easier than if I was by myself. So one thing that I wish, is that I had formed the partnership earlier, to be honest with you. But yeah, like I think, things happen for a reason. So I enjoy having a partner because like, like we can divide and conquer. Lavinia has strengths and skills, that I don't have. So, like it's especially Lavinia has YouTube channels, she's good with branding. So all of those things, like when it comes to the firm, I let Lavinia take a lead on that. And I take a lead on more of the doing like the systems, doing the legal work, the strategy for the cases, etc. So I'll let Lavinia jump in.
Yeah, I think that's quite accurate. Sorry, I just had to remove myself off mute. I think that that's accurate. Like we definitely have complementary skills, in the sense of, being able to merge our strengths with each other. And I think that's what really makes it a really wonderful partnership in the sense of us remaining profitable and also effective in the work that we do. I think that it's a lot easier to join a firm after it's already been functioning and alive for a full year. I will say that I did try earlier in my career twice actually to start my own firm, and each time I ended up closing up shop because the reason behind it was not good. The reason was simply I wanted to fill a gap on my resume and then start working elsewhere. And so here it's different because this isn't a means to an end. That's the plan, right? Like the firm is here, it's a going concern, it's going to remain a going concern, and that's the only option for me moving forward, for us, for Alphonse Latham. And so it makes a huge difference, I find. Working with Carl, like he's fantastic with connecting with people, with pulling in clients. I think the way they call that is the rainmaker. That's Carl for sure. And then, of course, that marketing piece and, putting our brains together on the law in different areas. Carl is quite amazing as it relates to US and Canadian immigration law, his area of experience. And then, being able to bring in the employment law, human rights piece to it, it's very complementary in the sense that we're doing work for corporations in so many different spheres of what they require and what they need to remain successful. So very interesting, very fun. It's been a month of it so far, but it's been a very busy month, I will say.
Now, speaking of a busy month, I know we're right in the middle of Black History Month, and I know that both of you have been involved with some panels and speaking with cable and other organizations. So I know Lavinia mentioning confronting anti-Black racism being at the forefront of her practice, but we'll start with Carl in terms of and again, this is a Black-led law firm, two very successful partners in the legal profession, and certainly I recently had a conversation with the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals of what can Black-led businesses, Black-led law firms, and thriving in the legal profession, where historically, you look at other than the cover of the firm magazines, right? That we're looking at a lack of diversity and difficulties and struggles for Black lawyers and Black legal professionals. So anything, maybe you can sort of highlight what you've talked about at some of these events, and what are your thoughts, and especially with your own firm now together, of some initiatives there to provide that guidance, and again success stories for other young newly licensed Black lawyers and paralegals to look up to.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. Like our firm, like we spoke it in a lot of panels, studying this month with the Black History Month. Lavinia and I, we were in a panel with Cable, Canadian Lawyers, Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, and the topic of the panel was relating to trauma, that clients like dealing with clients with trauma and how that impacts legal professionals, that deals with those clients, like, because sometimes, like the trauma that the client face could also affect us, as legal professionals. So like, yeah, it was a really good panel. One of the story that I shared was one of that I shared recently about my first client that I had to notify of the death of his wife. That was a really difficult situation, but you had to exercise a lot of emotional intelligence to do that. So like we shared lots of different tips. How legal practitioners can deal with trauma and mental health that they face. Like because of the area of work that I deal with. Immigration is one of those areas where is so important in the client's life, right? Like, because when the clients are here, if they don't have the proper immigration status, everything is affected, So for me as a legal professional, I take that really seriously. And I think at different point of my career, I suffered like maybe like a burnout as a result of that. Learning from those experiences, there's different steps that I take. For example, I try to have a circle of people that I can rely to for different purposes. Like I make sure, I make time for my family, my friends. And the most important too is having a hobby outside of law, like so me, I like giving back to the community. So I do that by through the Rotary Club of Brockton. I'm an active member and I'm also part of the board member, and we do different goodwill activities in the community. For example, in February we had the Black History event, for which I gave the opening remarks. And yeah, like that was a really good opportunity to engage people in our neighborhood about the importance of Black history. That Black history is not only the history of Black people, but also history of all Canadians. Also, like other things that we did, like we also have like the coldest walk of the year, February 22nd, where we gonna raise funds for like a good cause. So for Black History Month, like we also had another panel that we discussed. Which panel? Lavinia had multiple panels, so Lavinia probably had way more panels than me. So Lavinia, maybe you can talk about the panels that you spoke then.
Yeah, we're barely at midway point for February, and I think there's been like 4 or 5 opportunities, which is fantastic. So, last week alone, of course, there was the one Carl just mentioned with Canadian Association of Black Lawyers Cable, where we were talking about client trauma and how our various different approaches are with client trauma and how we protect, ourselves so that we can remain professional and effective in the work that we do and we're representing people. But following that was a play followed by a fireside chat with Mr. Frank Bayless, who is the liberal the liberal leader candidate in the current elections. He's running to be the leader to replace Trudeau as the party leader. And so the story, or the conversation rather, was about his mother, who her name is Gloria Bayless, who was the first racism at work case in Canada back in 1964. And that conversation was an incredible opportunity to engage with the community. It was a really nice opportunity to give people access to the law, which I think is really important through public legal education. It's something that I've been doing from the day I touched foot, even before law school, engaging people with the information that they need to protect themselves as, marginalized individuals. So there was that, which was really well attended. It was sold out. The next day was a session, a facilitation with, in partnership with York University Osgoode PD, whereby I was engaging again in conversations related to human rights, specifically the duty to accommodate, which essentially is an obligation that's on employers and service providers, or those captured by the Ontario Human Rights Code, to engage in, accommodation measures for individuals who require it as per their disability needs. And so that was a great conversation because oftentimes, engaging with these educators and making sure that they understand that duty to accommodate and special, disability rights, they're very much intertwined with race, because oftentimes those individuals who are denied the duty to accommodate, they do tend to be racialized in nature. So there is a lot of intersectionality there. So while that wasn't necessarily a Black History Month event per se, it's a certificate program that runs every year. There is still an element of Black history in it, in the sense of being cognizant of the fact that there are these issues that are recurring within the Black community, both prior, to now and today. And then, of course, the following day, actually yesterday rather, there was a lovely event by TD Bank in partnership with Cable again, Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, called Being Bold and Authentically You as a Black woman in corporate spaces and leadership. And so that was a conversation regarding just remaining true to yourself. So a lot of the success that I think Carl and I have both enjoyed thus far is, and if I can speak specifically for myself, because I know, we all have different ways of attributing what makes us us. But I know for me, it's really been engaging in my truest self. So not trying to be what I think a lawyer should be, just being myself. And at the end of the day, being a lawyer means being excellent and being well learned and, practicing in a way that is of sound judgment and always putting your client first. And I think that applies to paralegals as well, because we are servicing the public. People are looking to us as the expert in their most vulnerable times. Whereas initially, when I entered the profession, I thought I had to look a certain way. I thought I had to act a certain way. I thought I had to park being a bubbly, happy person to the side. And none of those things were helpful. In fact, when I was being, cookie cutter version of what I thought I needed to be, that's when practicing law was actually quite difficult. And now that I've, leaned 100% into myself, just giving you a tidbit of yesterday's conversation, the success really rolled in thereafter. So yeah, it's been a very busy Black History Month. There's still more on the table to come. There's webinars that we're doing in partnership with organization that Parents of Black Children, for parents to understand, their rights before the Education Act. Carl's got a webinar coming up at the end of the month related to corporate and I believe immigration, U.S. and Canadian immigration. There's some more webinars coming out. I believe the next one with Parents of Black Children, the organization, is going to be about the Privacy Act and freedom of information requests. So there's so much coming from Alphonse Latham. One of the things I think I would encourage people to do is put yourself out there. When I started my firm and then closed it how many years ago and where we are today, I think the biggest difference is access to LinkedIn, access to YouTube. Like you could just put your stuff out there and people will follow. So.
Perfect. So let's learn a little bit more about some of your practice areas. And I know for both of you, they're so widespread. So if I'm going to give you a question, and you can kind of go in any direction of what is sort of the day in the life of someone practicing in immigration, Carl. I know obviously there's many different facets, but if any students who are interested in going into immigration law or any newly licensed lawyers or paralegals who are thinking, can you sort of share kind of like an immigration 101 in a few minutes of the various things that you do and any guidance you can provide of either navigating through the Immigration Refugee Board or the application process. And I know obviously each area in of itself you can give me an hour answer, but let's give me kind of the highlights there for someone who's interested.
Yeah, definitely. My practice is a bit different than a lot of the lawyers. The reason why my practice is different is because I combine refugee law and also business immigration, and I also do way more US immigration compared to the Canadian immigration piece. I would say right now my practice is probably 80% business immigration. So what I do on the business immigration front is that I help companies, or it could be entrepreneurs, startup, find the proper immigration options for whatever goals and objective that they have. Like a lot of time is to attract foreign talent when they get the talent in Canada or the US, retain that talent, and sometimes transition that talent from a temporary status to permanent residence, or what they call in the US the green card. A lot of time too, is also helping my client deal with compliance. A lot of times that immigration official try to audit the company to make sure that they have the proper documents and that they're paying the employees what they're paying them. So yeah, that's from the business immigration front. So, like what that means is that, like when my client, like for example, I can give you an example for this week. I had a client, like that had to send like some accountants, to the US for an audit. So they they sent the application on Tuesday, and I had to fill out, like there's 5 people traveling, so I had to do 5 TNs, for for this weekend, so like we sent them already. I signed those application today. So it's really fast sometimes when it comes to business immigration. Because like for for US immigration, for example, so like Canadians can apply at the port of entry, meaning once we prepare the application package, we send it to them. Now they have to, some port of entry, some borders require that you book an appointment beforehand. So, like I tell my client, hey, like call the border to see, what the hours are. I also tell my client, like it's better to go during regular business hours. So you don't want to go, during the weekend when you have someone who's not well versed with processing work permits, because there's more chances that your case might be denied. And also tell my client to keep my phone number on hand in case something happens at the border, to do extension at the port of entry. So the only thing you could do at the port of entry now is new applications. But there's exceptions for people, that are coming from like a free trade agreement. So the NAFTA, agreement with Chile and all the other countries, those you could do at the port of entry, right? But all the other countries that are not like a visa exit country or a country that could come with the ETA, they need a visa for, to apply to Canada. And those countries, they have to apply online. And those applications are made at the embassies of those countries. So usually when it's online, it takes longer, because like if you could do the application at the port of entry, you have the application package, you make the application, you get the decision right away. So on the business immigration side, like it's much faster compared to the individual side, the refugee side, because like cases go really fast, right? Like, it doesn't take months or years for cases to go. When you're talking about refugee application, like right now, there's a refugee crisis going on in Canada. There's way more refugees than the immigration anticipated. So, they're saying there's 250,000 refugees waiting for a hearing. There's only a few hundreds of the members that adjudicate refugee cases. So, everything is being really slow. Back in the day when I first started my career as an immigration lawyer doing refugee work, usually someone could get a hearing within like maybe 2 months of being in Canada. So it was really fast. And actually at that time, that was what immigration was going for. Within 2 months of that person filing their basis of claim, they get their hearing. But now we have people that filed their basis of claim 2 years ago that's just still waiting for a hearing. And like, and it's likely that the wait time will increase. So yeah, so it's different times that we're living to. And now, refugee cases are getting more complicated. Like when I first started, the safe third country agreement wasn't there. So for people that doesn't know the safe third country agreement, if you came to the US, then you moved to Canada, like you're not able to apply in Canada because you should have applied in the US, because that's the first safe country that you've been to. When I was when I first started, that wasn't an issue. So there was a lot of people that were coming from the US, like they will come to Canada, like they will still be able to get the refugee adjudicated. But now with the safe third country agreement, if there's no exception, one of the exception is having family in Canada. Family is mostly like siblings, parents. If you have one of those family members, you could fall into the exception and still do your refugee application in Canada. So yeah, so like yeah, it's really interesting. Like I was in a CBC interview with one of the lawyers that's been practicing for more than 30 years. And like he said, he had an interesting perspective about Canadian immigration, especially on the refugee front. He said that, like what changed, like 30 years ago compared to now, is like it's more complex, for you know to do cases now. Because like back in the day, it was so simple. Even an applicant would have been able to do it themselves. but now it's so complex. Even lawyers have difficulty doing the immigration. And even worse, like with the pandemic, a lot of things, there's been so many changes for immigration. Some of them really good because a lot of the things are automated and a lot of the things are streamlined, and also technology is used a lot. But one of the bad thing with Canadian immigration is that we have so many different portals. There's at least a dozen portals for a different purpose. I think one of the things we could do is reduce the portals, so there's one portals for everything. But I could go on and on. There's so many things happening in
Thanks.
immigration.
Thanks so much, Carl. Now, Lavinia, I know obviously there's a couple of aspects there on the human rights side. So either we could look at walking through a human rights application on either side for those interested in the Human Rights Tribunal. And as well, maybe you can also touch on as you've added the workplace investigations, which is something new, and we don't certainly cover as much in terms of what happens in a process like that where either the employer comes to you and says, we need somebody to investigate an external investigation into what's happening, in the conduct of our, employees via each other in terms of a situation that may involve discrimination and so forth. So whichever, you could touch first on and then get into both of them as a quick summary for all of the students and anyone listening.
Yeah. So one of the things about the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal, it really is meant to be accessible to the public. You shouldn't need to have a lawyer or a paralegal or some type of a legal representative help you. And for the most part, I would say the tribunal is quite forgiving. But of course, anything that you include lawyers in tends to kind of get a lot more complicated than it initially was. And so it's I would say you do need a lawyer or a paralegal, right? And for paralegals listening to this, there's a very wonderful opportunity to litigate, right? The first section or the first step to this is an application. And so the application does need to be drafted in a way that makes it clear what enumerated ground has been triggered, what service provider, how, in what way is the Ontario Human Rights Code that jurisdiction? So is it services? Is it accommodations? What is it as it relates to government? The next piece would have to do with, you draft the application. From there, the respondent now has an opportunity to respond. The thing about these applications, they do have to be drafted in a very clear, succinct way. So, like, if it's not clear to the tribunal how they're in the jurisdiction of the Human Rights Tribunal, if it's not clear how the allegations relate to one of those the various different areas that are covered, the service areas that are covered, then the next question then becomes, why are we within the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal? So following that, you've got the application, you've got the response. Then one thing that I always tell my clients is you need to say yes to the mediation option. So the mediation option, a lot of people are so aggrieved, especially complainants, that they're like, I don't care for mediation. I need a decision maker on this ASAP. And so it's actually not a good thing to not be willing to mediate because it just shows that you're very litigious, or at least this is what it looks like on its face, prima facie, that the applicant is litigious. They're not willing to negotiate, and they're just looking for their day in court, which is not what the tribunal's about. They do encourage mediation. They do encourage settling. The hope is that you don't need the full scope of the resources available because you are able to come to a resolution with the other party. So that's the Human Rights Tribunal piece to it. I would encourage paralegals to read up on the Ontario Human Rights Commission and the work that they're doing. Right now, the Ontario Human Rights Commissioner is Commissioner Patricia DeGuire. They're doing fantastic work with the Right to Read report, which is, of course, related to education. The great thing about the tribunal is it touches on so many interesting areas. So there's education, there's policing, there's some work as it relates to accommodations, housing rather. So there's so many things that you could do there, and I think it's really an interesting place for paralegals to do some work that really touches home. I think everybody can identify with some type of marginalization at some point. We're all, as human beings, going to be, healthy one day, sick another day. That's disability rights, right? So there's that. As it relates to workplace investigation, so this is something that you do not have to be a lawyer or a paralegal to do, but you do need to be someone who's able to be impartial, able to be independent, and able to be equity seeking, somebody who can be fair, in other words, right? And so that process looks like a human rights complaint comes in. It comes into human resources, they receive the complaint, and it's like, okay, well, now what? Like, you can't necessarily just take it on its face and say, well, this person's complaining, therefore it must be true. That would be unjust. And you can't, on the flip side of it, say, well, I know so and so, and he would never do anything like that. Therefore, that complaint is garbage. That's not appropriate either. And so that's where workplace investigations come in, whereby an independent decision maker, somebody who's able to vet evidence. So paralegals, you guys have this skill, as well as lawyers. You're able to, look for evidence, assess the evidence on its face, and then determine which evidence do you lean more towards. So there's judgment there. You need to be able to assess someone's credibility, someone's reliability. So are they trustworthy? Is what they're saying make sense, given the circumstances? Whose side of version of events do you believe? The process looks like, number one, we do interviews with the complainant, hear what they have to say in a one-to-one, just like this, actually. Number two, you give the respondent an opportunity, or defendant, same thing, different, decision-making tribunals. Of course, courts are defendants and tribunals are respondents. But here we would call them the respondent. You have an interview with them and determine what their side of the story is. So now you've got complainant and you've got respondent. So you conduct reliability and credibility assessments on them, rather, to say, like, whose evidence do I trust the most? And you also give them both an opportunity to let you know who they thought witnessed it. What was their evidence? Was there videos? Was there text messages, emails? What are they relying on as it relates to their side of the story? So once you've got those pieces, now it's your turn to now look for some witnesses. And the hope is that you can identify some crossover witnesses, which is great, because if the complainant and the respondent are saying, hey, Susie saw this, that's fantastic, because you get to put aside the possibility that Susie might be maybe more partial to the complainant or maybe more partial to the respondent. Where you don't have that fantastic witness who both sides are leaning on, then in that case you would try to achieve justice, or fairness rather, by maybe giving them the opportunity to name as many people as possible, and then maybe choose 1 to 2, 3 to 4, depending on how big the investigation is, how many allegations there are, of witnesses to interview next. So there's that. Then once you've got all of that information, that you are now going to go through and see, where do you fall as it relates to the allegations. You've heard from everyone. Where are you thinking that things seem to make the most sense in terms of what actually happened? And that's when you start to draft your report. Once your report is drafted and submitted to human resources, then that report, they can choose to provide it to the parties or not. But at least the report is there. And if this does progress to the Human Rights Tribunal or any other honorable court system, the next step would be that would be evidence, right? And so the fantastic part about a paralegal or a lawyer doing that is that you actually have academic and professional experience of being a person of good judgment, being a person who's able to vet evidence and assess evidence and use your analytical mind in ways that will benefit this dispute. So chances are likely that evidence coming from you would be seen as quite persuasive in a court of law, and that would be really fantastic for the parties if it is in their favor. So that's kind of the purpose of workplace investigations, which I love, because it does give people access to justice. Oftentimes it doesn't get to a court system because the court system is expensive, doesn't get to a tribunal because it's long-winded. And so you might see justice right on the grounds of the organization, where they're like, you know what, we hired this external investigator. This is what they found. We're going to proceed with discipline. So it's just a nice, easy, faster way of achieving justice.
Perfect. So thank you both for taking the time to join me and share about your new law firm as well as your respective practice areas. If you have any final words of wisdom for the students and newly licensees or anyone really listening, here's the time to share. And thanks again for joining. So we'll start with you, Carl.
Any final words of wisdom? So maybe what I would tell the audience, is to grow your network as much as possible. Like for my law firm, one of the my best source of clients was my own network. So having like people in your network that you could rely on, that can vouch for you, being helpful to people, like making sure that you keep tab, or like you keep in touch with them. That really goes a long way for my law firm. And I'm thankful for everyone that sent me clients, because like that really helps, like having a network, like that referral source. I can't emphasize how nice it is, when you could get clients that way. Then the second thing I could tell to the audience is get mentors. Like get mentors. If you're working in a firm, get mentors in your firm. Get mentors outside of your firm. But for the mentor relationship, make sure that it's a two-way street. You're not doing all the taking, but you bring some value to your mentor as well. And like the thing with mentors is that there's gonna be people that are mentoring you at different stage of your life. In the legal profession, a lot of people are busy, right? So, if you go approach a mentor, make sure that you are ready and you're not wasting their time, right? So that's really important. So yeah, and also be mindful, that people, like a lot of people, they want to help, right? But it's just people are extremely busy in their firm and also with their family. Like they have kids, they have different responsibilities. It's really hard. So yeah, be mindful of that. And the third thing I would say is, like enjoy the moment. Like in law, like I know, I know, it's like we want to be perfect as lawyers, but we not gonna be perfect. We gonna make mistakes. What's important is not making mistake, but learning from them. Like making sure, like you taking care of yourself. Like so. You're taking care of your mental health. You are making sure you're putting yourself first so you could deliver the best rest for your clients.
Perfect. And I guess Lavinia, you can get the final word here. If any final words of wisdom for anyone listening.
Yeah, I would say believe in yourself, and nothing good in life comes without challenges and without needing to be resilient and perseverant. The legal profession is a difficult one in the sense of it's very demanding. Whether you're a paralegal or a lawyer, it's very, very demanding to take on someone's issues as if they were your own, and then to, resolve those issues or work towards resolving them in as best of a way as possible, including having this additional layer of accountability, which is the Law Society. And so, taking care of yourself, knowing when to turn off, not being hard on yourself, as Carl mentioned, realizing that it's not the mistakes that you make, but it's the response to the mistakes that matter the most. So, we are going to make mistakes. We're human, right? But remaining resilient and knowing that like your approach is the best approach, like you're here for a reason. And we want to see that for society in the sense of, just being able to shine as bright as you possibly can with your unique talents, gifts, and services that you can provide and your contributions to the profession. So, don't be too hard on yourself. I know Carl said that, but I think it's important to repeat, just because we can be hard on ourselves. And sometimes, you're doing your best and the little A-type in each and every one of us, I think the legal profession tends to attract quite a few A-type people. It's a crazy blend. It's a scary blend rather. So yeah, I would just say lean into what's going right and the rest will fall into place.
Perfect. So once again, thanks a lot for taking the time to join me, and wish you all the best with the continued growth and success of your Alphonse Latham LLP law firm. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, JP.
Thank you.